I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's on.
Thank you.
Good.
I got
I
delayed
can-
for a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good evening to our guests and members of the book club. We are happy to be discussing Stanley Coutinho's debut book, She Winked. Stanley has been a very regular member of our book club and indeed has contributed to our discussions. Before I hand over the baton to Rujukta, who will be chairing the session, I would like to go through some regular modalities. Next month, we will be discussing on the 31st, The Promise by Damon Galgut. A professor from South Africa will be joining us to chair the session. And we will also be releasing a book of poems that we have been working during COVID season. So the book will be ready by the 15th of this month. And we hope that you can spread the word and make people receive complimentary or paid copies. Our book club is also going to be 3 years old next month. It's a happy occasion for us because we have not missed a single session and we have gone from strength to strength. Our present membership is like 78 members. We started as a motley group of 28, 30 who wanted to have a book club for the South, but felt that there were no opportunities that were existing. And we started meeting in person, but when COVID came, we just went on Zoom and went online. And it's been fantastic for us because we have been able to invite authors, we've been able to invite academics who have studied the books and people who have researched on them or people who have translated the books. So with this, I hand over the baton to Rujukta. But before we do that, let us do some onerous duties. Please hold out your copies. And I don't think that Stanley has had a formal launch. So here's to Stanley and many more books to come. Viva.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
I use a soft copy. I have read the soft copy.
that's all in your.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the book we've
Hi,
taken,
Rita. Nice to see you. Yeah, please carry on.
the book we've taken up today is Mr. Stanley, our very Mr. Stanley own Coutinho from the Margao Book Club. And if his style of discussion and very clear and concise and without mincing any words, style is to go by, it reflects in his book as well. We'll get to that. So a little about his background. So Stanley completed his senior Cambridge examination under ICSE, where he was introduced to Shakespeare, Shaw, and Gogol, among other literary greats. And this is where his love for literature took seed. But being a self-proclaimed practical man and a realist, he continued his education in the field of commerce, where, as luck would have it, he ended up studying Thomas Hardy, Somerset Maugham, and others as a part of his curriculum. His love for literature thus continued. Having procured a degree in law and business management, he thereafter cleared the UPSC exam and was assigned to the Ministry of Defense under the Department of Defense Production. The department has 41 ordnance factories working directly under the government and 9 public sector units. For over 30 years, he worked as a bureaucrat in varied parts of India, managing these units. After his retirement, he continues consultancy for advice on legal and management matters. Through this period, he has done a lot of book reviews for Herald, the Press, the Free Press Journal, and Business India. He is in the process of writing a novel, which he says, and I quote, "I expect will take another 100 years." So I expect him to work in a few years. Yes, okay. So moving, like I was saying, so Stanley's very clear, concise, no-nonsense views that he shares during the discussions you can find that strain in all his in the work that he has produced. So it's exactly like that. It's very lucid, it's very frank, it's very to the point. He comes straight to the point without beating around the bush. And especially I felt when it comes to very sarcastic, cynical humor, he does not hold back. He gives it, how he feels. It does not try and mince his words and spare people's feelings. I loved it. So Stanley takes his readers, but we'll go to the humor a little later. So he takes us through a gamut of varied topics and emotions. He takes us through pain and anger and romance and abandonment and delicious pangs of guilt, heartbreak, shame. And with that, he gives us life in between. He gives us life lessons of philosophy. He talks a little about romance. He talks about nature. Then suddenly he changes landscapes and takes us to a school play. He takes us to a train station. He takes us through a rainy, tea stall. He takes us to government offices with all its file and crumbling walls. And with all this, he takes this whole journey. So you think that you're going, you settle in. So when the book begins, it begins with this very let's say somber, because he started writing, like he put in the work when we were going through the initial stages of the pandemic. So he talks about the plight of the workers. He talks about how they were stuck, or they didn't know when they would earn an honest day's living again. And so that whole mood, it starts off with that, and then it slowly, the whole thing changes. So he intersperses it with nature, daffodils, poems, goes on to give us some philosophy in between. And so how strongly he feels about them. Continuing with the topic of philosophy, there are a lot of poems, like in the poem Sting, for example, in a short span of 3 pages, he takes us through so many emotions. So there is love, then he takes us to heartbreak, then he takes us to hope, then he takes us to realization, then heartbreak again. So in these 3 pages, you've gone on a roller coaster ride and lived through it. And it's such an experience that I'm sure everybody has gone through this sting, which is a perfect word to describe it. So the sting of wanting to be with someone, being romantically interested in someone, and not having that reciprocation. So that in that simple 3 pages, he's been able to bring that out with so much intensity. And speaking about philosophy, which I was very surprised that Stanley's talking about so much philosophy, but there are so many nice lessons that he has given and reminded us about. So, for example, in the poem in Friends in the Wilderness of Life, he gives us a message about how the laughter of friends is the most important thing. Or in the poem The Tinkle in Her Laugh, he talks about how people run, like people are free to go after materialistic things and run after all these worldly possessions. But for me, I would be happy with the lilt of a laugh, and that's what's most important. So at the end of the day, what are we looking for? We are looking for something like that. Then in Patience in Nature, he talks about how the task is important and not the end. So again, reminding us of the lesson of how the journey is important and not the destination, final destination. He talks about in Talents Don't Shout. He says that when somebody has talent, they don't need to shout and make it clear. It kind of just shines through. Or the life lessons and learnings and practical philosophy that we read is a great reminder. So time and again, it's simple poems, but it gives such an important message, and you're re-reminded of these things that you tend to forget. So I really, it resonated with me a lot. For me, the favorite thing in the book was, of course, the humor, sarcasm, and cynicism. I am an extremely sarcastic person myself, so I could relate to what the examples of humor, like, they don't even wait for the poems to start. So I found it so funny that in the beginning, in the preface itself, he has been able to just stick to the point. So allow me to please indulge. So this he says, so this was followed by over 3 decades of a life bureaucratic, where the dry office notings was the bread and butter of the day, and reports and returns tolerated no poetic dimensions. All hopes and dreams of elegance of language were lost between the reference to your above and see my below. I have cackled for I don't know how long with this one line. So yeah. So from the just the whole style. So it just comes effortlessly to him, is what I felt. So armed with sarcasm, he continues drawing his sword, and his first victim is the recipient of the poem, The Sleepless Rooster, on page 27. If you all want to turn, I'm going to please read this because it's just too good. In the wee small hours of a bleary-eyed morning, when the sun's yet a promise of a new day dawning, even before the Fajr is sung, from the neighboring masjid's topmost rung. Our friend is up and about and scanning. He searches around for a picture that's nice. The words don't matter, should only sound wise. It could be a bunch of forget-me-nots, or worse still, those silly touch-me-nots. He's got to send them, or the sun just won't rise. So it's like, I understand. Yes, absolutely. Or the next poem on the next page, I did choose hope. So I won't read the whole poem, but so basically he's talking about his, he wrote a poem that was not well received, and then finally he decided that he's not going to write the poem. So never to write through pearls for swine, I found more pleasure in bottles of wine. Just the last, takes the cake. Or on the next page again, the darkness within, even before we go into the poem, it says, have a great day, said this message, accompanied by the picture of a bright dawn. I responded darkly. So just the whole to the point, concise, cutting. I really wonder what this person who received all these responses said. What was the pratikriya, as they say, of these poems? Okay, so his cynicism and humor and sarcasm are very dear to him and reflect through not only his poems but his stories as well as his titles. So what's apprehensions? I found it very interesting the way you made it, or the betrothal unstuck, where he talks about a very common incident of, a matchmaking incident, which he gives it a very humorous turn. So again, a very funny take on the whole incident. His humor is again not only brought out through his poems and stories, where you'll find like typical, but also through characters. So he has he's a very nice way of bringing out his characters, going into their skin basically, and then arming them with language, which then brings out that humor. So he has in English coinage, a character with questionable pronunciation is brought out through spellings. What, instead of dismantle, he says dismantle, referring to his status of mind. Instead of crowded, he says crowdy. Instead of people, he says peoples. Instead of deteriorating, he says deteriorating, garbage, everybody. So it's like you're going through these and you're chuckling and you're, going on that journey with the character. So similarly in Chinna Vedu, his talent of bringing out the mannerisms of a character once again shine through with the style of talking and spellings that he puts into to suit with the pronunciation. So tanth for 10th, or sar, burgers, 1000. All these are examples of how he brings out his language and character in these stories and poems. For me personally, I like the short stories. Like the short stories resonated with me more. So I found a lot of themes very like I kept thinking about them for a long time after I'd finished reading them. So in The Worm, for example, or in Chinna Vedu, he talks about how the office politics, how the government works, how it is so difficult to keep working in such conditions and still manage to get work done, keep maintain your humor. So that it in a poem, not a poem, sorry, in Izzat, he talks about the sad reality of life and how one's character is given more importance than probably the act that is committed. Or in Haunting Tunes, he talks about common teenage love and the mixed signals that we get. Two of my favorite stories were Incurable, where he talks about the fear of abandonment, that Alzheimer's, and the whole stage of this fight between the son. Like he knows that he has this responsibility of his old mother, but he's still fighting with, why do I have to take care of it? And in that he goes and he reminisces about, he goes into nostalgia. So it's a beautiful story. It's very touching and reminds us all of certain stages in our life where we've gone and dealt with these kind of situations. I also loved postcards, again for the theme of nostalgia, but my favorite in the entire book was the story Castle, where I am a fan of thrillers. So I really liked the way you made it so crisp and concise. We were just waiting to see what would happen, how it would end, and the end was really worth it. So yeah, these things. If along with that, I noticed there were 2 or 3 things, in the rhyme scheme where in the poems He and Valentine's Day on page 96 and 97. So you follow this thing where you rhyme the first and the
Yeah.
yeah,
First 2 and the last 3.
Yeah, and then you leave, the last one, even the one that I read, you leave the last probably line without any what do you call it, like a rhyme basically. So is there a like reason behind that? I want to know. This is a nice experiment that I really liked it, in the sense, so in Valentine's Day, for example, tree rhymes with me, fine with Valentine, and then me is again left, it's a odd man out kind of feeling. So I want to know what was the thought behind that. Yeah. And one thing that I don't know, I thought like two poems, so that he, where you're talking about this wife who who's really troubling the husband, so that whole theme is like, the mother is poor fellow. And the second one also, where the power of two, where the husband just leaves without communicating with the wife, and then the whole drama. So I felt like a little bit of the blame game on the woman in these two pieces. So we can talk about that later. Okay. I have a few questions that I had drawn up to kind of get to know this work a little more, get to the history behind this. So I will ask those now, and Stanley can answer. Okay. So, how and when did your writing journey begin, and why did you start writing? So we know a little about it, but if you could.
Oh, it started a long time ago. It started somewhere in the when I don't know. I think I mentioned at the age of 19, I'd written a short story which I got published in the Times of India, and that also with a lot of hesitation, as I said. It took about 2 years for me to actually get to the Times of India from where I was staying. So I had this urge to write for a long time, and then I wasn't very sure about acceptance and all that. So that is always a problem with a writer, I suppose. And once you get accepted, maybe you can go ahead. But that was the time around the age of 18, 19. I must have started off writing stories and poems and keeping them in my book, not for publication. Then later, after I went to Bombay for my just before my retirement, I used to get these morning messages again from a cousin of mine, and I used to write back to her in verse, and there's a lot of exchange of poems that way. So that kind of sharpened it a little bit more. Then when I came down to Goa, I found that these things had become the WhatsApp had become a medium for people to communicate without meaning anything. So you just send out a picture with something on it and say good morning. So I was reacting to that initially. Then I have friends like Paul and others who said they're writing little, I mean, it's not just irritation that is showing through. So you better start thinking of publishing them. But that also took another year or so of hesitation and compiling and then finding publishers for it. So I had to go online and find some people who would care to publish my work. So that's it. So that's how it all started.
So did you like share it with people and get to kind of initially begin get a feedback?
Yeah, on the Facebook, sorry, on the WhatsApp page group itself, I used to send it back to that person who was happy about sending those greetings, and there was a group. So the other members of the group responded. They found that it was better than just irritation. And then I used to put them. Then Paul introduced me to another place called the Writers Arc, which is based in Chennai. So they asked me to write something every week. So that was a kind of challenge. So then the poems, short stories, and all that started pouring out at that time. So a lot of stuff went on to Writers Arc. And when there was what one would call a critical mass, then I found better to look for a publisher now. So that's it. So that's how I'm here in Shiving.
Okay. Which is your favorite poem or story from the book, and what was your inspiration behind it?
I think among the stories, The Sting is my all-time favorite. And the poem was, it's a very odd kind of poem. The one on new mythology.
Margarita is just joining us.
Ah, good. The new mythology was also a kind of the picture that was sent. I think I have sent it on my WhatsApp group. If you've seen that,
Yeah.
it is a very odd kind of plant, which apparently blooms once in 3 years or something. It's called a silver sword or a patience plant. So that is the one I thought was, and it's something that came out without much of thinking. It was almost spontaneous, and there was not much of polishing required afterwards. So I think you got the book with you, so I need not read it.
Okay. Many poems feature, like I said, I was talking about the rhyme scheme. So what was your thought behind this particular rhyme scheme?
That particular poem that you have mentioned has got the limerick style. No? Two lines rhyming first, then 2 lines, and the third line rhymes with the fifth line rhymes with the first 2.
So it's your favorite rhyme scheme I felt through when I was reading the poems.
Yeah, quite.
Okay.
Quite a bit of them are limericks actually. Sorry.
Yeah. What kind of challenges did you face while writing the book?
Finding a proper publisher, and then when I did find, I found that these online publishers, sorry to say, I don't know, I hope I'm not insulting anybody around. Most of them, sorry?
Ruffling feathers, so to speak.
Yeah, I find that they consider this as if they are, buying potatoes and onions in the market. So you send the stuff there, and then they said, okay, yeah, it can be published. Nobody has bothered to see whether there's any quality in it, or what kind of stuff is being published. If there's anything objectionable in it, they kind of have a disclaimer that we are not responsible for whatever you publish. Okay, as far as objectionable stuff, maybe, but the rest of it is at least some kind of quality control, quality, what do you call that? Reading should be there so that people have. The author feels that his work has been appreciated and then allowed for publishing, but they don't do that. In fact, even in this book, Savi was talking about the format. I had to do the formatting myself. Yeah. Because they had made a mess of the whole thing. So,
yeah. Can I intervene for a second?
Yes, please.
See, I've started publishing from 2007. And, you have these heartbreaking stories of how publishers handle things. So I've had, I decided to take the self-publishing route. And sometimes you find that it is much better that way rather than have a vanity publishing. What you've done is essentially vanity publishing. You've given them money and they've published your book for you. But here what happens is they do not check on a lot of things regarding the manuscript. They do not check, its sellability or its appeal or its coherence, as maybe a private publisher who is taking your book will do for you. Or if you're doing it yourself, you will do for yourself. Their bottom line is we want the cash that comes with it. And you get the thing of having published, having printed. Yeah. But one, it's much cheaper to do it on your own. It's also better because you can get a community of friends to work with you. And what happens in this is it's a very lonely journey. Like if you had shown me that manuscript first, you could have not taken it, but I would have given you advice. Because once it's out there, a potential of a writer is left. You see, the potential goes untapped. Now someone will look at this book and say, why did he publish poetry and prose together? Okay. Why did he not take a particular, let us say, a particular segment, like you are writing those messages, those poems as messages? Why did he not publish that in itself, allowed it to grow, given it coherence within itself and published it separately? Or some of your stories, they come from your background of having been a first secretary. They come from your experience of having had lots of direct experiences. Now you might say She Winked was, lady literature inviting you, but you are blessed in many ways because you have a lot of direct experiences, which other people don't have, because you're handling the state, you are an official of state, and you come to see lots of things that are happening. For example, I think the castle is one example, or maybe Izzat is another example, several those things. But you don't have to have a reportage. You can trim them the way you want to suit the present. Okay, we'll talk more about that later. Let Rujukta continue with the honors of interviewing you.
Actually, I was going to ask the same thing. Same thing. That what was the thought behind publishing the poems and short stories in the same collection? So why didn't you do two separate works?
Actually, in the beginning, if you remember, I was talking to Leonard Doggier. He hasn't come today. So he was of the opinion that if you have only poetry, it doesn't sell. I shouldn't have bothered about the sell part of it, because even now I'm not really concerned with the sell, rather than getting popularity for the book itself. The sale and all that is incidental. But then when he told me that, somehow that struck me, and I said, okay, let's have a combination of both. I would have preferred to have the story separately and the poems separately, but then he's in the field. Yeah. So I thought maybe I should take some advice from him also.
Actually, I had attended a work in between, and someone had told me that there are, rungs of publishing. So the most important publishing is, or the best offers are given to people who are celebrities. The second to those who are massy writers, like Chetan Bhagat, for example. The third is given to regional writers, to fiction, then regional writers, and the last is poems. So very few people read poems and buy books. So yeah, I can understand why
they have a separate readership. So
they do
as well.
Yeah.
So you've already told me, but you right now are working on your novel. Can you tell us a little something about that?
Yeah, that's, as I said, 100 years, because I've been working on it for the last 100 years also. The thing, it's about the time we spent in Bombay in the emergency. I was in the law college, so I kind of made the whole story around that, where how we reacted to the declaration of emergency, how we lived through that as law students, what it meant for us as law students, because what do you discuss in a constitution class when there is no constitution left? Okay, but then there is a future, there is an examination. So how we balance that, the student's requirement or the classroom requirement, as against the possibility of being pulled up for saying the wrong thing in the class. It was a very serious thing in those days. So I've gone through that, but then I'm getting entangled in that kind of the arguments there. So that's why it's taking such a long time. But hopefully another 6 months or so, and
done.
Should be out.
Good. Something to look forward. Okay, last two questions. So if now that the book has come out and you've seen whatever, how if there was something that you could change or add, what would you change or add
in the book?
Yeah.
Maybe I would have put a few more short stories, and poems also. I would have preferred to have them grouped as those good morning poems separately, and the as you said, the philosophical poems separately, so that there is a kind of order in the book. Now you can't see much of order in it. I don't know your impression.
No, okay. But okay. And the last question is, if you want your readers to take away one message, or something that you want them to take away from this book, what would you want it to be?
I was going to ask that of Dr. Belinda, finding out how she analyzes me in the whole process of these poems and short stories. No, but nothing specific actually. I wasn't really talking about I'm giving any particular message through this. The book rose out of flippancy, and I hope it is not as flippantly received.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, I will pass it on to Savya because she wanted to talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Rujit. I think you've done quite a lot of work on my book.
I think that's a brilliant reading and exposition of the book.
Yeah.
And she's really kind of gone into the stories and gone into the poems and looked at, your style, your writing and everything. I always trust Rujukta in these delicate matters. So thank you very much,
Thank you,
Rujukta.
sir. Thank you. It means a lot. Thanks, Stanley.
And I have read the prose pieces. I've not had time to read the poetry this time because I've been shaking my leg and doing all sorts of things in Amritsar for the wedding. But I have read a lot of prose pieces and I liked your prose essentially, I think that's your forte. With a couple of poems that I've read, what I feel is, you have to get the pulse of poetry. We have all had an Anglo-Saxon background. You studied British literature, you've grown up on British romantic poets, and they're kind of ingrained in our head. But very often when you're writing, you make a very serious mistake, which actually starts becoming a flaw in your writing. You're writing for an Indian audience now. Forget those British usages, like daffodils and talking about war at a time like this when we are running away from soldiers and bayonets and, recalling poetry that talked of war. I can imagine, probably I'm as old as you, so I can imagine that you grew up at a time when, we had to study the Battle of Hohenlinden and, a whole lot of yeah, all lot of poetry, which came essentially after independence and liberation. But at a time like this, when, populations, countries, world institutions are turning against war, you start from your own terrain. Don't, get the daffodils and the other things into the picture. Start from your own. You're much stronger there. If you don't want to quote Indian poets, quote yourself. You're on very firm ground. That is one thing. Then I feel, you're submitting your stuff too often, too soon. You're submitting your stuff too soon. Jerry Pinto once said, now Jerry Pinto is such a celebrated writer. He said, you have to revise a thing at least 30 times. Show it around. Nobody copies. People can't copy you unless they want, some kind of pockmarks on their faces. So show your work around, get a critique, and then rethink it. It's always the best kind of advice. Your prose, that's all I'm going to say about your poems. But your prose has a lot of potential. But again, you have delivered them too soon. You have to rework. Like some of these stories are, mind-blowing, like Postcards needs to be developed further, or Castle. It can be sharpened and fine-tuned. It's a fantastic poem, fantastic piece of writing, let me tell you. Which other did I read? Even about your school, college play, I think. That's again, I don't recall the title. Arun is the central character, I think.
A Job in the Middle East.
Job in the Middle East. That's fantastic, but requires more work. You need to create an atmosphere, a coherent internal atmosphere, which has happened too soon because, when you're writing, you have to keep one thing in mind. You have to develop a scene and you have to develop a summary. You can give dialogues, but that interiority of a piece of writing, to explore it is very important. Like, I think it had some gems in it, but you lost out because, it just was prematurely delivered. The other piece I really loved was Slamanabad.
Slimanabad, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that Brit who kind of stopped, this kind of rampaging. I would love to know the atmosphere of that village. But it happens so soon. Your ending is brilliant. Your ending is brilliant. But why are you in such a hurry to deliver? It's not necessary. As a writer, no, you have what is called a craft. You have to take your writer's craft. You have got a fantastic template. Now, how you paint on it, that's very important step by step. And if you had held on to those pieces for a little while, you would have gotten into mainstream writing, like all these other writers who get published by main authors. The trick is to hold on, and the trick is to rework. And, take certain, what do you call them, pegs of writing. Like you create an atmosphere, like you go more into the place. Islamanabad, for example, I don't know what the place is like today. I mean, what happened to all those tribes? Were they around there? What those families, how did they gentrify? All those questions were in my mind. Even the last piece, you needed to create more atmosphere. You had a lovely template, those letters. But, you could have gotten to more because you had a window. You could have gotten to more of that, and created an atmosphere. But please remember that for your next book. Show it around, let people read it and critique it. Don't be in a hurry. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say. Now I'll pass it on to the others. Margarita, very happy to have you. Rita, rhymes with Margarita, actually. Happy to have you. After a long, it's the first time.
Yes,
Steve,
yes.
it's your maiden voyage into the Margao Book Club. You're a member, right? Paul Matthew, you should come again. And Norbert, be there. Glennis, hold on. Our poetry book is coming next month. And okay, now carry on.
Yeah, Margarita.
Gopal, I'd like to know what you look like. And so also Lumen. Lumen has, I think, left.
Lumen is left?
Looks like it.
Yeah, Margarita, would you like to share your thoughts about
Yes. I'm sorry I missed the beginning, so I don't know what you initially discussed. Because I only, as I had said, I only arrived home at 1:15, so I just rushed to the computer. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back, and I apologize for this absence, but it's just been a crazy beginning of the year and all, last year as well. And I have to say thank you to Stanley for involving me in this, because he sent me the book in a PDF copy of the book in December, so I was able to join the session. So this one I knew I was going to come to. I can't, unlike Savia, I did the opposite. I kind of read the poems and I skipped. I skipped a lot of the prose. Okay, I got when I got to the 17th of April one, I stopped because it's my birthday. Okay, so I did that was one that I read, and I enjoyed it. The poems, I understand exactly what Savia is saying, but I'm not one to criticize. Okay, because I'm still very, how do you say, I'm not a poet. I love poetry and I do write my own poems, as you know, but I'm not as knowledgeable as Savia is, to be able to critically assess. But I can say that you are very much bound to kind of this Shakespearean influence, which is not of course, this is not a bad thing. It's actually, it is a good thing, because it's also your use of language. It's so rich, the way you express yourself, the way, the variety of descriptive language that goes into your poems is absolutely wonderful. Okay, it's not only the language, but how you perceive everything around you, nature, or how you express, I don't know, love, emotions. So I really enjoy your poems. I think they're very rich from a linguistic point of view, full of very rich imagery as well, or Sorry, that's my dog.
Yeah.
And also, I also enjoy the simplicity of some of your themes. Okay, I don't know if you agree with me that you would call them simple or not, but you know, there's as I already said, be it flowers or birds, you know, nature, or emotions are not simple, but the way they can be expressed in a simple way. Something else that I also enjoy about your poems is the references that you make, you know, whether it be other poets, Shakespeare, you know, and also, but also there is, you know, bits of India there as well. Although, as Savia said, you could speak to an Indian audience, bring more of it into it. And I saw a little reference to Portugal as well, the bica. I don't know if there's any more in your prose, but in the poem I did see it.
Coffee.
Yeah, exactly. So, but they are, I love unrequited.
Yeah.
Unrequited, yes. I think that's a beautiful poem. I did very much. I read it first when you posted it on the group in WhatsApp, and then I've reread it, and last night I read it again. This morning I read it again twice because it's a poem that speaks to me. I like it very much, and I also like bare truth because I don't know. Unlike some of the others, which seem very structured and very planned, bare truth seems to be a little bit more spontaneous. And I like a lot of spontaneous poetry. You know, I'm into a lot of the beatniks, and so I love these little thoughts. And bare truth seemed to me to be a bit more spontaneous. And maybe this is something that you could explore, since you have that skill of language and to express what you feel and how you perceive everything around you, to kind of express it more spontaneously. Maybe you can try that as well.
Yeah.
And finally, I also enjoyed you bringing the social media into your poems, kind of, you know, WhatsApp and LinkedIn, the gadgets. I thought that was clever as well. So congratulations, Stanley, and I wish you all the best. And I want to read more. I'm going to read the prose as well, okay? And I'll get back to you on that.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Margarita. That was really from the heart. Very nice. Norbert, would you like to share your? You're on mute.
We can't hear you, Norbert.
No, maybe you can log in again. I don't know why we can't hear you.
Maybe it's kept on low volume.
No, you've gone on mute again. Maybe you can, yeah, I'll come back to you if you can just,
Yeah,
log out. Yeah. Glennis, would you like to share your thoughts?
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on this occasion. Congratulations, Stanley, for she winked. And I'm still wondering why she winked and not he.
Anyway.
When there are two poems, she and he included into in the collection. All right. So the positives of this book, which I get, there are a lot of brilliant new ideas. I love the technique of your prose. And as Savia, I corroborate what Savia says. It has to mature over time, and it needs a lot of brushing and polishing. You know, it's the whole craft of writing a narrative is like that of a goldsmith. You take the raw material and then you need to polish it, and then again you need to take it in and put it in the fire and test it, and then give it shape again, and then you feel something is wrong. It's like the final submission comes after a long time. The longer it's like wine, the longer it stays, the higher the intoxication of the final product. So it's like that, so you have to keep it for some time, so that those ideas should grow and mature. So the ideas are novel, they're new, they have come over a period of time, they have come with your experience. You have taken, like a true poet, you have taken the most mundane things which you would have ignored, like a WhatsApp message, for instance, which comes as a good morning. I would have just ignored it. I would have just blocked the sender. I do that. It's so irritating. But no, you have taken it up and you have made it a subject of some creative writing. So these small things have sparked creative ideas in you. Then there are these pandemic ponderings, of these migrant labor and a lot of the woes of the pandemic times, which have figured into your writing. There are references to languages more than English. There's Tamil, there's Hindi. There are different linguistic features, which, the Tamilian sar and the way, the pronunciations, which are different, for each character. It's something very novel. And there is also this baggage, we come to know the colonial baggage, which is looming large, as Margarida or Savia has pointed out. You cannot part from Shakespeare. You cannot say goodbye to Tennyson and Blake and Byron. They are there in the background somewhere.
It's a part of the DNA.
Yes, it's part of the DNA. They are there. You cannot bid them goodbye. They're there. But, you need, it's nice. But where is the goal in you? We want to see a little streak of that coconut palm, which is on the one front of the coconut palm, which is there on your cover page. We want to see a little slice of Goa. We're discussing you as an MBC member. Where is Goa? I felt there was something amiss. I was wanting the Goa and Stanley Coutinho to come as a reader and, inspire me as a reader. Sorry. Then I like the end, which is ending on a personal note. And I'm sure that has a very personal touch on the banks of the Mandovi. The unusual things, what I like about is the use of the cinquain, the unrhymed poetic form. And you've experimented with the cinquain. I had to read a little more about the cinquain, the American cinquain.
Yeah.
Interesting poems. What apprehensions? What if? There's a poem, he, and there's another poem, she. She is in tercets. You've experimented with stanza forms. Very interesting. You've experimented with stanza forms. The modern poetry, the 21st century poetry says goodbye to rhymes. It doesn't bother. It goes more on giving shape to thoughts. But you have given the traditional, the conventional English rhymes entry into your poetry. Okay, then there is On Human Wantonness, an interesting poem. The use of techniques like diary writing in one of the prose pieces, diaries. The whole thing is like an epistolary technique that you have used. The whole story goes in through diary entries. I can't remember the name of the story, but that is a very novel thing. Then there are other things like the caste issues, the Chhatri character. I think that's in the castle.
Castle.
Yeah, the caste element that you have brought out through the name of a character. I too love the poem A New Mythology, but it requires a lot of finesse. It requires a lot of polishing. In fact, I have contributed 2 poems for a collection of poems on Indian mythology. And I had to do a lot of reading, a month of reading to write a poem to suit the theme of mythology. So here you have blended together the contemporary ethos with mythology, which is a very challenging thing. So A New Mythology is a brilliant seed of an idea to write a poem, but a lot of brushing required there. I love the ideas that your poems can go in for a critic of eco-criticism. Lot of nature blending literature, okay, very oriented poem. There's seashore, there are birds, there are the blue skies, there are the waves, you know, there's so much. Nature is talking through your poems. I like the sunflower, very short, concise poem. The sunflower is really a strange one, for it blindly follows the sun. You'd be equally idiotic if you are heliotropic. Thank God you weren't botanically done. Beautiful, beautiful poem. The poem ends there. Okay, I just love it. It's beautiful. You have potential, Stanley, potential, and you need to explore it. The negatives, I'd like to be blunt here, is that you put everything together. You've made a cocktail. You've made a cocktail. Why should I buy a book wherein I do not like prose? I'm a poet, a person who is allergic to narratives, for example. Why will I pick up? I only want the poem. So I'm forced to buy a book wherein there are narratives and there is poetry together. Okay, so I would want poetry separated from the prose. And the way you have arranged them is like one poem, one prose, another 2-3 poems. And those poems are not even thematically labeled. You know, they're not compartmentalized in terms of their specific themes. And they are thematic. They are thematic. There's so much of potential to put them in jackets.
To reorganize them.
Of themes. Yeah, organized, you know, under certain sub-themes. So, I mean, there's so much of potential in you, Stanley. And this book has just given us a slice of you. And I think your 100 days of writing the novel should be just a metaphor wherein you can divide it by 10. Okay, sure. All the best to you. And I'm so glad that I read. And thank you for sending me the e-copy of the book. And I've enjoyed myself, you know, getting acquainted with your writing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glennis. Nobody want to check if you're no.
Again, you're on mute.
Even with the other one.
You're on mute again.
It's not working. Anyway, yeah. Okay, Steve, would you want to share your thoughts?
Not maybe next time. Not this one.
Okay, all right. Paul, you're on mute.
You're on mute again.
No, but you're unmuted now. Try.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Norbert is speaking.
No, that's fine. You speak. Norbert has a problem with his.
Yeah, I just want to say that very honestly, maybe I'm also to some extent biased because I've known him for more than 50 years now. But I found that the book and his style of that very wry, skeptical kind of, you know, the side of writing, where he sees humor, but as Rujita said, there's a certain amount of sarcasm without hurting, but there is a sarcastic humor, kind of off the cuff. And for me, this whole idea, I was surprised when I got the book with a combination of poems and stories. And what I liked about that style was that it was a constant surprise what is going to come next. I read it in sequence. So there was this poem, and then suddenly I find a story which is equally engaging. Again, I find a poem, and another poem which is totally different. Short poem, long poem. So I enjoyed that roller coaster ride without knowing what's going to happen next. And I also feel, I mean, it's a very personal opinion. I'm sure many of you will probably may not agree with me. I feel that art has to be raw. I think perfection takes away the sharpness of the medium. I feel it has to be raw. I do not want to see a perfect play where everybody's perfect. I want to see that light blowing off and seeing how the actors respond to that, how they sort of, you know, handle their situation. I want to see a writer writing something which is not maybe entirely smoothly flowing, but jars. But I mean, that's how life is, and that's how I think art should be. So in that sense, I enjoyed the work as it is, and so I wish Stanley all the best. I'm grateful to all of you for having welcomed me to this meet, and so all the best, Stan. Keep writing, and from my side, keep writing raw stuff.
Thank you, and I hope you join us on a regular basis now.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah,
Thank you.
Dr. Rita.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, I just read poems, and I'm not into stories. So as everyone said, I've gone through a few poems, and yeah, spontaneously I write something which is again raw, and it's not again as you all expect into perfection. But as I read the poems, his style of writing was something I felt different, and I was trying to understand what probably was running on his mind when he's trying to write in that style. That's the reason I'm here, just to understand what was the story, what was on his mind when he was writing poetry. And as you all have asked him and he has answered, I get the deep history and cultures and all the experiences that they have gone through or lived through is something that has inspired, and which is absolutely alien or something unique. I mean, I'm not used to, or I've not lived through. So I've got the answers for what I was here for. But Stanley, congratulations. And well, I'm not a critic, so I'm just here to hear from all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Norbert?
Thank you very much.
Norbert, I think you give him a chance because Norbert has multiplied. He's on a phone and also on the computer. I think.
It's both, but both are not working. Maybe you can rejoin, like exit and rejoin. No.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah, you can.
okay.
Maybe you can type it out and one of us will read. Just
Can't be heard at all.
okay. Stanley, anything you want to say after you've heard all of us?
Yeah, what Xavier said was, I mean, very close to what I had felt also. And see, another thing is that if I cut short my stories, cut short in the sense that I stop abruptly, is an old problem of being self-conscious actually. I mean, the fact that you're on stage for too long and it's about time I got off, kind of thing. That's kind of thinking that goes into cutting the story short as fast and making it as fast as possible. That is what poems have a flow. So I suppose I go through the entire process for until I have said what I want to say. But in a story, what happens is if I find that maybe I'm getting bored myself if I go any further in the same narrative, then I try to kill somebody off or get somebody and finish the story. So that's the lesson. But as Xavier correctly said, I could have probably talked to some of the persons who are in the field of literature and got advice from them. I have been pushing it around. Paul has been one of my major advisors and very patient with whatever I have sent to him. but then, as you say, probably I should have sent it to people who are actually in the field of literature. Paul, by the way, I think he has not introduced himself. He's what? He's got a company. What do you call it? What's that company called? You talk about yourself.
Corporate theater.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. I use theater for experiential learning for organizations in high performance leadership and team dynamics.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, that's a lifeline, but my passion basically is theater. I'm a theater actor.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice to have you with us.
Sorry.
Nice to have you with us.
Thank you
again.
Thank you.
He's acted in a few movies also.
Yeah, because of theater, I've got a few movie roles, but the joy is always in theater.
Yeah. So Norbert is
Okay,
back.
I've
Or?
admitted you, Norbert. Just see if it works.
He's stuck now.
Yeah, it's a jinx. Oof. Okay. Also, another thing, I'm talking from my seat as a writer. It's not actually a critique. Like I was discussing this story with Rujukta earlier. Well, I can call it a story, but it's rather short. It's that Izzat. It's a nice theme, wonderful. Those two groups meeting, and I can clearly see that the protagonist is the person who's trying, government servant who's trying to control the whole thing, right? And for the life of me, I can understand, as a writer, as a woman, I said, why did he stop the crowd from going to his place? You could have made it a peaceful protest at his house. So it was not enough for the government servant to say, oh, I saw, saved a bad man from dying. You could have changed the tone of the crowd. They wanted to teach him a lesson. Today, when you read all these feminist writings and all, you realize that the best kind of solution comes when people teach the offender a lesson, and not the person who's a girl. So when you brought in the woman saying, ab to sabko malum ho gaya, the whole thing, it lost its direction. You know what I mean? But it's such a lovely story in its essence. So you can rework that. For example, don't give so much of a voice to the government servant. I know sometimes you see yourself in that, and then you would have probably experienced something like that. We all write from experience, but change the tone according to what modernity demands of you. And you have to make that transition. Nobody can make it for you. You have to see what is the tone of the public. Now, when you're writing on an issue like child molestation and rape, I would not write a story which would save the offender. There are stories which have sold where you find the wife killing the husband. I mean, if you take, the recent entry into the Oscars, that Power of the Dog, that boy kills the man who's harassing his mother, the brother, the brother-in-law. Oh, I was reading a book, Men Don't Cry. This woman takes agency in her hands and she, slow poisons her husband. So that kind of an angle where you take law in your hands and try to teach the offender a lesson, because very often you find law is not helpful, or something else is not helpful. So you identify a crime and hit at the criminal, that sort of a thing. So you can rework some of these stories, some of these things, and also approach a mainstream publisher, but you have to rework them. Because you have fantastic material on hand, and only you can do it. Nobody else can, because you have had a lived-in experience of these things. Okay, so next time, don't be in a hurry. You'll be sorry. Okay. Take time and let it mature. Like Glennis said, let the wine grow richer, right? Okay, anyone else would like to comment? We are 8:30 we stop, no? We finish. We are getting closer to, we have half an hour.
About 8, yeah.
Yeah.
Is Norbert through or?
Norbert, could you get through? Steve, you're sure you'll not like to attempt?
I haven't read the book yet, Savia, but I plan to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I need to leave now. Thank you very much.
Yes, it was
Good
a
meeting
pleasure.
all of you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul, for coming.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you.
Savia,
I should thank-
I just maybe I'll just if I may, I'd just like to say a couple of things in line with what many of you have already spoken about the whole process, Stanley, of the maturing of whatever. Yeah. So I had written a book in last year. It was the Indian Boss at Work. And I went through a publisher. And, many of the things that you missed out, the publisher, the editor was doing that with me, which is to hold my hand and because they have a very uncanny sense for what's going to work, what's not going to work, because they do this all the time. In a fit of consciousness, I wrote, 130,000 words, and they wanted to bring it down to 80,000, and cooking it and then taking it out was very emotional. And then they wanted another additional 10,000 words, but I had to take off 80 to 70 to accommodate 10 industry corporate inputs, which they thought would make the book even more pickable off the book stand. So I think what everyone is saying right now is that one is the story needs to be cooked. I remember many of the chapters that I'd written, they pushed it back at me and saying, it needs to start in such a way that you hook. Every sentence needs to grab. And I thought that all of what they were saying was spirited towards intention, towards knowing where the reader was. And I knew where I was with the content, but I didn't know what was going to make the reader leap up. And, but I was holding the book with a lot of intensity and a lot of research and a lot of experience, but I wasn't holding the reader. I thought the reader would understand what I was trying to write. So it ended up becoming very sutric. I had compressed sentences, I had, shortened it down, and there were times when they said, could you tell a story? Could you add an anecdote? Could you make it? So what I'm perhaps trying to say is that there is a lot of merit in getting the initial burst of the story matured with what I think, Savia, you suggested, toss it around to 5 or 6 people, listen to all the sound bites, and then correct it. I probably have version 1 to 300. On one chapter itself, there could have been probably 200 versions of the whole thing, just correcting, wordsmithing, and my wife was doing a lot of grammar. But what's great, based on what everyone has been saying, powerful potential, storytelling, tremendous amount of free flowing, and so all of that seems to be there. I'm going to go and buy your book and certainly read it. I went through some of the extracts which was freely available on the website right now. It's a lovely first book off the shelf. It's such a fantastic thing to celebrate, and congrats again. And it just gets better and better as you start to write more. That's what I wanted to say, Savia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Anyone else would like to go? Because Margarita, would you like to add something? Glennis, Rita? Would you like
to? I'd like to say something now. There's always this problem of good publishers not taking in novices, a first-time writer or whatever, not even looking at their manuscripts. Now, these celebrated writers, they must have made a first attempt somewhere. Na? So unless and until somebody gives them an opportunity, how will they get the whole their work into the mainstream of mainstream publication? I mean, look at these publishing houses. They only look at celebrated writers. If there's a celebrated writer who's even giving them some hogwash, they will take it. And there are some good writers who are having a good manuscript with him, and just because that writer is not known, he's just kind of sidetracked. I mean, I find it so painful at times.
Making the pitch, what it's called, is also as important as getting your writing noticed. When you already published, it's not difficult because you already have a issue in your hand, a book in your hand. But getting writers noticed, getting publishing houses or agents to notice you is a big uphill task, especially now when, the whole publishing industry is going into a different phase altogether. Many houses are shutting down. You will notice when you buy books, many of these business houses are coming together to create one publication. So Random House will be with Penguin and 2-3 others, and they will bring out a publication to give it greater leverage all over the world. The other thing is, where you are located matters a lot. Like if you are a Goan writer settled in London, let us say, or settled in the US, the ability to contact agents or to contact publishing houses is far more easier. I spent a year as a Fulbright fellow. This was in 2004 when I was just working on my first book. And I sent a small synopsis to several 5-6 agents, and the reply was overnight, send us the manuscript, and, they will also tell you, pitch it in this manner, give us exclusive rights, send it to us first. So they are always looking for material which is new, which grips, which has solubility. So very often you will find first-time writers, afterwards you learn the tricks of the trade. But first-time writers will give it to, one editor, second editor, third editor, and then get it polished quite a bit. I remember giving my first manuscript to a poet, what's his name, Manohar, and Eunice suggested it to me. Yeah, Manohar Shetty. Eunice D'Souza suggested it to me, and I felt he didn't make many changes, but sometimes the direction he offered helped. And later on, even now, today, when I have, not in the last 3 books, I always go to Manohar, get a reading from him, and it has helped me. So, these people have also been editors with publishing houses. They've published, they've been editors with magazines. So that cleaning process helps. So I would suggest you just pick 4 people you're comfortable with. Vet your material. Give them maybe 2 chapters, 1 beginning chapter, 1 end chapter. In any case, if you're going to contact an agent, you have to submit your material. So don't hold it so close to your heart. Always, give material and see that in such a way that you create your own pitch. If you give a first chapter and a last chapter of a novel, or a first chapter and a middle chapter, generally they ask for 2 or 3 chapters. The person who is your agent or your publicist or your publishing house, they will get the gist of the material because they're reading so many manuscripts. And but getting that eyeballs for the first book is what probably you faced, and be in a comfort zone to give it to people and get it vetted. More people read, the better it'll be for you. Even get somebody like your wife to edit it. Anup and I, we always, look at each other's material and give helpful hints. At the end, you may not use it, but you know that, it's gone through a different set of eyeballs as well, right? So this is for your next book. This one we've already discussed.
Maybe I could improve on whatever I've already published.
Yeah, but
next edition.
Next edition. Okay, anyone else? We have a lot of time.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this, the postcard story, you've ended it on such a, I'll get to that another time. When is this another time going to come? I'm very interested in this story.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said I tend to get off the stage as fast as possible. Once I've got your interest for some time, then I jump off.
Yeah,
and I thought it, and I'm like, oh, it's not there, and then I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's a tendency I have to get over. It has been there for years now.
You kill the goose that's laying the golden egg, huh?
No, Actually, in that particular thing, I was wondering how to close the story. It was going on, and I didn't want it to get too mushy. See, it is not a very nice, very pleasant experience to see your father in that condition. All that. It's about the partition. I'm sorry, about the so-called liberation of Goa. If you've not read the story, so there is that reaction at a very personal level inside a family, and that's how I'm describing that situation. And this is the kind of a reaction I have got from about at least 3 or 4 different people. My father was one of them. Okay, he didn't do all that what he did in the story. There are people whom I have met recently, and they told us about how they had gone the next day after the liberation, after the war or the battle, and they had gone around Goa and seen what kind of reactions were there among the people, even including that statement that until yesterday it was Viva Portugal, and today it is something else. I didn't want to mention what it was, because in today's political situation, it's not safe to mention that either. So that is, and then it was a personal affair. So I said, let me finish it on this personal note of this girl and close the story.
But there's a
probably,
issue there, yeah.
Probably I could have gone a little further there.
Glenitz, in case you want to know why he's not written about descriptions of Goa, the last line of that story will tell you. He said he packed his bags and went away. So that's why there are no
there's only one story about Goa there. One story about Goa, and I think one poem about Goa.
Yes.
That last poem, personal note.
And
can't hear you.
What I mentioned,
the last poem and on the banks of the Mandovi.
Yeah, that's about Goa, and the postcards is about Goa.
Yeah.
Rest of it, I think it is rest of the country.
So that palm frond, right, the palm tree on the gives an impression that you're a Goan, and there's a lot of Goa going to be there. It's beguiling.
Yeah. It's a Goan writing. No, actually, that I wanted something about Goa on the cover. That's what the main thing. But yeah, I think, as you say, there should have been a little bit more about Goa in it. Maybe the next time I'll have another collection.
And don't make the whole thing like a khatkate. Everything together,
Yeah.
It has to be neatly.
What did you call it? What did you call it?
Katkate.
No, not khatkate is a vegetable stew with different leftover vegetables.
Okay.
A curry we make. Khatkate, you call it. Totally. Don't put it all together. Just give it so that we can neatly, bookmark it kind of with a different tag.
Yeah,
at least not poetry and prose together. I think this is the only work I have read wherein everything is together. That means you wanted everything to be published. Come what may, kind of. Don't give that impression to the reader. You have that potential. Right now I have written, say, 20 poems. I've kept them on my folder. Let them mature. Let me revisit them. Let me relook at them. And let them take their time. We've had Lindsay come here who said that his book was not being published at all. And he
wasn't bothered.
he was not bothered. He said, maybe I will be my own reader. But at one point of time, it clicked in such a way. And did he tell us how many people read the work before he published it? I think that itself gave us so many hints, how to. This story about the postcards abruptly ending, prematurely you are ejecting the whole poem. The prose. You have to allow it to simmer, and the end should not be a conventional end. I have to admit, because of Stanley, I got into the writer's arc, Artoon Sin, and I was a judge for one of the story writing contests. And thanks to Stanley, he introduced me to that group. I got an exposure to wonderful narratives written by writers. And from there, I got so many different ideas. I must tell you, Stanley, thanks to you. Okay, and
Good.
the end should be such that it that it just tugs and strums a different chord. What beautiful stories. I must tell you. Okay, with regards to the story which she spoke about, Izzat. It's about the woman's.
The girl being molested.
I just like to tell you a story of Hema Naik. Most of the stories which I'm reading at the moment, I'm basically translating Konkani stories, and I've translated this one story by Hema Naik. Hema Naik is a very famous writer, Konkani writer, and the story is called Durga Avatar. Durga's Avatar, and she's a feminist writer. She writes. This story is about a woman who has, we don't know, she's living alone with the sindoor and Mangal Sutra and everything. And for 10 years, her husband is not there. And she has, and you enter her house, staying in a mining belt somewhere, Ponda side. There is a mat in her house and there is cow dung smeared around. But that little raised part, she's put her bedding there, and she never folds her bedding at the entry part of her for the last 10 years. So till one day her friend comes over and tries to ask her, what is wrong? Where is your husband? He's not coming back. And she's staying like a married woman. And the end of the story is so beautiful. She's disclosing how she has murdered her husband. She has buried him there and she's sleeping on top of it for the last 10 years. Okay. And she's a Durga.
Morbid.
Story. I'm waiting. Once it is published, it's coming in Cielo Festino's collection. Okay, so once it is published, you will read it. Okay, so I waited for the story to come out. So fantastic story. We've not read it because it's not translated. So you could see the thought process. The whole thing comes out only at the end through a conversation, and this whole thing comes out. Otherwise she would have been arrested. She's saying if the body was found, she would have been arrested because he was assaulting her day in and day out. How long would she suffer? So she killed him. She put him in and she smeared cow dung. She put a bedding and she never ever folded that bedding. So, some kind of thought processes which can be so creative. So creativity is something, which you need to work on.
Yeah.
So that just kind of trying to tell you, like I thought of it when that Izzat woman's perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stanley.
Thank you for all your views.
Thank you, Rutuja, for a wonderful moderation of this.
Yes, I think she's done a very good study, more than I had done myself.
When I get into a work, I really get into it. So I was very happy. When I started reading it, I was like, oh, it's going to be a very serious book with like such serious topics. But then as we went in, there were so many topics that came in. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to actually ask you about the power of two. How did you come up with the story? Because I felt it was a little a person would never try and communicate at all before moving out and like taking such a big decision.
No, in that, if you want an explanation, see, the woman was very busy. She was a vice president of an organization, and she was too busy to even look at the progress her son is making in college. Okay, and he says, I tried to talk to you, but you were not there. Physically, mentally, you were not there for me to talk to you. And therefore, he decided to talk to her through the Facebook. You can imagine a husband trying to do that. It's like people sitting at the dining table and communicating with each other or somewhere across the world on your WhatsApp. Okay, so he is trying to communicate to her, but she is not able to understand. It's only when she finds that he is somehow moved away from her, then she realizes, okay, there's something wrong. I have to get into this. And she goes back to the office dispensary, finds that it's been abandoned quite some time ago. He's taken up a job, he hasn't told her, but she's upset about that. And only at the end, she finally realizes that this guy is actually, he's not planning to leave me, but he's adjusting to the situation and trying to somehow see that the child is properly given attention for his. And, that cup of tea is a symbol of that need for her to get back to him and for him to actually get back to her. If you see that cup of tea where she says that.
But in modern times, when like how things have changed now with women having demanding jobs and having to balance work and life and all that. So this kind of story like you mentioned it also, I'm not a he says to himself, I'm not an MCP to expect that, I should have a hot meal on the table. Or she says, I'm not a feminist to think that unless I serve him tea, I'm not a good wife. So for me as a feminist, it was like very weird to read, because I felt he was punishing her for I don't know, taking up a
Was
job.
he? No, but was he punishing her? He was just saying, okay, you do your work, I do mine. I make sure that my child doesn't suffer because of this problem. That's what. I don't think he's
But it was
punishing
very
her.
passive aggressive way of
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I said. It was very passive aggressive way.
Every couple, I guess, every couple, I suppose, has to adjust to each other and decide what to do without
And their
breaking
solution.
down the structure.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
But the structure also changes sometimes, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
I think there's a line which says that you will wait for the highway to come up or some such thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what. So that he'll be taking less time to go to the office.
Oh,
He won't be taking that hour and a half.
okay. So that's
Okay.
been a wonderful evening. Thank you, guys. And do come again, do visit often. Margarita, you may not attend, but you may not leave, because we value you, we love you.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave. I just feel guilty sometimes,
No,
for not participating as much as I should.
Put a lock on your guilt box so that you don't have to. I'll put this off.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Savia, Rujuta, and of course, Glenis and everybody for their.
Thank you very much, Stanley. Please keep the spirit of writing alive and inspire us. You have already inspired me.
Okay.
Thank you, Savia, I must say, for all those inputs. There was
Yeah.
so much of discussion